Hello there, folks. Welcome to the Football Manager Streamer Showdown YouTube channel. Many people didn't know this existed, but we thought we'd add something new to our Showdown weekend. It's the Cooldown, the rejected name of the Come Down. Matt was very certain on. I am your host, well, co-host really, of the DoctorBenjy, better known as Ben, and joining me is the creative god that is Nerdphonic, or to you and me, Matt. So what we're going to do
before you carry on, Ben, I'm just gonna state that I am not a deity. Don't claim to be a deity, and that's just something that you've assigned to me.
Yeah, that's what we call you. So what we're going to do is talk through some of the creative processes, how our weekend went, and as it was the first showdown, it's going to be an action-packed chat about all the things that happened before the first showdown, all the way back in October, I would say, Matt. Right? It's been quite a process to get this first showdown going.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, the last one for FM21 was the end of September, and then conversations have occurred sort of since then. You did highlight to me that after checking to see if the database would work within the editor, we can do a showdown in November if you want.
Yeah, which I saw, and that was at the time as well. I wasn't very well. Like, my own content was suffering quite a lot, and I was like, by the way, if you want to do a showdown, I'm thinking, oh god, I can't even make my own videos, never mind a showdown. Yeah, it's a bit shambolic. So yeah, we've got a bit of a running order, so we're going to go through, and we'll start with why it was in January. Why wasn't it in November or December or earlier? Because as Matt has just touched on there, we could have potentially done it then. I think the intention, we always had the intention of, if like the game allowed it and the editor allowed it within Football Manager, then we would do one in November around the launch, right? We've always had this plan to do it then, because it would be the most eyeballs, I think was sort of our consideration. And then the further it got along, the more we realized, well, if we're going to wait until this point, and then it became sort of, I think so we had November, then early December, then early January, and then in December it was kind of like, actually, we're not going to make early January yet. And then we decided this was the right time to do it.
I mean, the January date, some of the, I think, like you said, the whole thing in November would be to capitalize on the fact that the game is brand new, and it would be awesome hype to have that. Then obviously December happened, and the early January one would have potentially happened if I'd have realized that I wasn't going to have a Christmas, if that was the case. With the amount of work I've sort of done over the past few weeks to get this one off the ground, I basically started the weekend, or started various bits of other prep that I hadn't already done at the time when we would have been putting that showdown on. So just to show, like, basically 3 weeks of January have gone into getting this to where it is now.
It's funny because I think every time it's always daunting, isn't it? Because we know between us what has to go in to creating that first showdown. We've done last year obviously was our first showdown, because the one before was the inception of the idea. Whereas we've now had two first showdowns, and the processes became, I would say the workload trebled, especially for you, maybe even more than trebled. Like, we could talk about what we did to improve some of the production values. Like, the delay originally was because getting numbers for people early in game cycles is a lot more difficult. People are very focused on what they're doing themselves, and again, we were coming out of a lockdown period too, so it was a little bit like, well, people just want to live their lives a little bit and not waste a weekend. I say waste a weekend, I like to think most people enjoy it, but I think, you know what I mean, there was this expectation of, actually, I've got a weekend to see my family that I haven't seen for X amount of time, and people were sort of catching up on that. So the decision came to have it after Christmas, and we now have sort of settled, haven't we, on the final weekend of every month, which is something that we've done before, and now we're just doing it again. Yeah,
I think we tried a few different things, and again, it also comes down to people's availability. Like, I think it's easier, really, if we set our line in the sand and say we are doing it this particular week, or this weekend, in a month, because then people can kind of plan the rest of their life around that if they want to be included or have the opportunity to be included. What we obviously, I think, when we thought about the early January date, the other thing we didn't consider was like other competitions maybe running on those dates as well. But ultimately, why we chose that date wasn't because of that. It was just that this is the next date we feel like we can feasibly achieve. Yeah. So it wasn't a case of we're trying to, completely go over everyone, and because Showdown does tend to be like, it's pretty popular as the viewing figures that we've looked over have been, but it would never be a case of trying to effectively blow anyone anyone else out of the water intentionally. I don't think it really even hit our radar. It was more very insular looking and thinking, this is a good date for us. We can get people available. Let's go for it then.
Yeah. Which is why we're keen to say final weekend of the month now. Like, people will know that's the case. We won't be derailed by an international tournament until November. Thank you, FIFA, for that. I can assume that was part of their consideration. So that makes the life a lot easier. Which would bring me to assume, right, that the next first showdown will probably be January again, going into next year when you consider the game release and then a World Cup over that period.
Yeah,
that sort of plays into our hands a little bit, that we'll be able to do it freshly in January all over again. But speaking on some of the production value changes that we made, because we did things this time that we've never done before. I've always talked about doing in different ways. Again, lockdown and COVID and everything else restricts us from doing certain things. But you decided to go on a mission. Tell people, like, for those who don't know, because it's like it was a mission. Like, there's no doubt about it. So tell people, what did you do, Matthew, over the course of the last 2 weeks, really?
So we decided that we wanted to get as much parity as possible with the level of quality that people have in terms of the footage that we use for them. Previously, I think the first couple we didn't have really anything, or it was assets that we kind of stripped available, what they had available online, basically. Then we asked people to provide photos and videos for the FM21 showdowns, which we used throughout. And obviously there were issues with lockdown, as you've already said, Ben, with potentially trying to go to people to get them if we wanted to. Towards the end of the FM21 game cycle, once we started introducing new people, especially those that either didn't have a green screen or didn't have a camera capable of shooting themselves, but video and photos, not anything else. Jesus. I already went to McKinn's and Dupe to get some footage from them for some of the FM21 showdowns, but with the footage I'd taken with my equipment, that looked significantly better than most other people's. So I thought, the best way to do this is to do a tour around the country, and we focused on the people that we knew were going to be in this showdown and anyone else who was available. I think I managed to get 16 or so people, not including myself, photos taken. It took me from Manchester all the way to Plymouth and everywhere else in between. So it was 13. I think it was 1,300. It may even be 1,500. Obviously, and that's just for this selection.
Sorry about that. Yeah. I feel like that's absolutely my fault, because you were supposed to come to me pretty early, but even, was it first? One of the first people was me.
You were number one, and then obviously there was a Doug COVID suspect issue. Yeah. So that put paid to that idea, and then ended up having to come back. Although, to be fair, like where you live, it's not crazy remote. It's just difficult to get to. It's like my brother used to live on the coast in St Leonard's on the Sea, which is next to Brighton, and that isn't like distance-wise, it's not crazy. It's only about an hour from London on the train, maybe even less. But because you can only get there through A roads, but also with there you don't have the issue of tractors like you do around where you live. So.
Few tractors. Apologies for that. There's a lot of pulling into lay-bys near me. Happens quickly. But when you triangulate Manchester, like the east coast of Norfolk and Plymouth, as you say, 1,300, 1,500 miles. But I think most people would agree the results that we've maybe been able to get from that, the shots we were able to give to Proudy for the intro, the assets we've been able to create both on social media and within the showdown, I think there were a lot of people commented on how good it looks. And we can't, to be arrogant, I mean, we knew it would look good. So that was partially why we went and did it, right? And massive credit goes to you for not only saying we should do this for that, but then doing it and traveling all around the country. You met some lovely people that you weren't expecting to necessarily meet.
Like, so without revealing people's own living situations, anyone's family members I met were absolutely delightful. Tea was on order constantly. Everyone was very accommodating, not just in terms of once I was with them and just general hosting duties, but also the fact that my schedule day to day was quite fluid, or had to be quite fluid, because when I first set this out, I didn't really know how long it was going to take to take everyone's footage and photos. So I'd kind of set out with a limit of around 4 per day. Which was fortunate, because if I'd have set any longer and any shorter period between people, it would have been ridiculous. So the max I was able to do in one day, I think, was 4 realistically, and I think I'd budgeted. By the time I'd done the first day, I had a better idea of how long it was going to take per shoot, as it were.
Yeah.
It took around 2 hours per person, or that's how much I'd budgeted for. And that's without like chatting, catching up. And some of these people are the first time I've ever met them. Anyone who has sort of not like has met people online, but for the first time, like in person, but for the first time, it should be weird, but it's not, because you've been speaking to them for however long you've been speaking to them. But also the accommodation in terms of like the time frames that people allowed me. Like I think I got to Luke's at like 10:30. But he was the furthest reaching person I had to get to. Yeah. But I was still at his at 12:30, bearing in mind, at that point, his wife is heavily pregnant, also has another son, and so still allowed it to sort of carry on.
They've had the baby. Congratulations to Luke and his family. Yeah, amazing news.
Ben had highlighted that I should have mentioned it or said we should mention it, and then I just forgot to mention it. Yeah. So one of those things.
That's the main reason for doing the cooldown, is so we can just say to Luke, congratulations. The rest of it is just filler, to be honest. But it's about, as you say, it was an hour and a half to 2 hours for each person, 15 gigabytes per person. That's my favorite bit of data.
I think it's actually higher. I think it's more like 20.
More than that now. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So there's a lot of hard drives, a lot of stuff for probably to download while doing the intro and sort through each file. But yeah, as I say, I think the results look great. Speaking of the results, we did a new intro, which we always planned on doing, but we were quite late in the day to say to Proudy. I think Proudy knew it was coming. That was the fortunate thing. So we budgeted, and I don't mind saying this because it's Chris Proud, isn't it? We bought Proudy a computer, Matt. Big thing to say to him, look, we're investing in you. Make this thing bloody good. And it definitely helped. Nothing crashed in the making of the intro.
Nothing aside from the usual After Effects ailments that affect everyone. So apart from that, I think we would have probably struggled with that timeline if we hadn't. And bear in mind, that decision was made quite late in the day after we realised we probably need to do this. It was one of the more extravagant Showdown purchases that we have made as a company.
But it's great though, because it now gives Proudy the opportunity to do this throughout the year really seamlessly. There'll be no issues for him whatsoever. And it's an investment. As you say, we see it as an investment in the Showdown, not just Chris Proud's gaming career, which I think will probably be elevated due to. Although having seen him play, probably not actually. It'll probably be exactly the same as it always was.
If HMRC are listening, he will not be using it for that. It's purely for work purposes.
No. And even if he does HMRC, he's not good, so it really has no impact on the positivity of my play. So, which is a real shame. But no, I think it looks really, really good. It's a funny process that we go through, because I have it in my brain. You then have to tell Proudy. Then I say it's a Proudy. Proudy goes, yeah, I don't really know what he means. And then you tell him the technical elements of what I'm trying to describe, because we have quite a similar. It's funny actually, like the amount of times one of us suggests something, the other person goes, yes, exactly like he's just described there, and then we give Proudy X amount of hours to put it together. You are missing
out like a vital piece of information, and I think it needs to be mentioned. Paint. The usage of paint to explain and get So what usually happens is Ben has the idea.
I've been outed.
You have been out. No, but thing is, the amount of times we it was a meme initially, but now it's actually really useful, because if I can't visualize it, what's happening, I'll ask you to put it into paint. Then I realize what you're trying to say, and then I can explain it to Proudy. I'm basically the conduit between the creative mind and actually like Proudy's mouse hand, basically.
Yeah. So if people like the design of it or the way in which it comes out, that's me. If people like the fact it's happened at all, that's Matt. And if people like the end product, that's Proudy. So we've all got a part to play. But it's a really fun process. But graphically, it was. I think everyone will say it was a step up. It's always been a thing of ours that we want to level up each time we do a showdown, and I think that was a big part of it. It's interesting because one of the big topics of conversation that come up when you move past the graphic stuff and you go behind the graphics is how we get to decide what the panel is, what the showdown lineup is. It's a big topic of conversation amongst the community. They're always curious as to how it's done and why it's done. I think why, and it's probably often the bigger question. For us, it's quite simple, isn't it? And it's more simple for us in this showdown, because for this showdown, we are going for the least risk based showdown possible. So if we can remove any new elements that we're not sure how they're going to work, and that tends to be people sometimes, then for this showdown particularly, that's what we went for. So it wasn't a coincidence. We didn't think, let's just see who's available and ask loads of people. We said, right, let's have people that have done this before, whether they've done one was enough, right? With McKinn's and Sai, we knew and trusted them enough to say, come back. But that's still, like we talked about it, that was still a big risk for us to say to people that had only done one of them, we want you to be key cogs of the machine this time around.
Especially with how much was potentially changing. Like we knew we knew what we were updating so it's not just the graphics that have changed in certain places on the lowdown in particular, but elsewhere. It's the behind the scenes processes that enable that to happen. And so each time we decide to change something, it means that people have to relearn potentially how things are done as we try to sort of optimize people's workflows and workloads, more importantly. Just because it's a lot of work to be able to, like, Mini had quite a lot of help on the draft day. I think we've realised now that he needs more help during the league and knockout stages as well, because there's just too much for one person to be able to manage. Where we've got to that point now where we're being, like, we mentioned it during the famed Sunday brief call, that that's becoming a bottleneck for us in terms of what we want to do next and bring things up. So there is that, but the element of risk in terms of bringing people in who aren't as familiar with everything on top of new stuff is quite a risk. And it's not because we don't want to, but we want to make sure it runs as seamlessly as possible, especially as we've not had one since September last year. There's a bit of ring rust on all of us when it comes to that. I think I
was nervous, mate. I don't know if it's obvious. Hopefully it's not obvious in my performance, but I'm thinking to myself, not only am I back in a showdown scenario, I'm not necessarily used to. Like there was a key reason why Sai, Dan, and Diz were on. They'd all pretty recently been part of lowdown lineups, so it made a lot of sense to me. Everyone that was in the showdown had streamed within the last week, 2 weeks. So again, I wanted to make sure that everyone was very much aware. There's always this argument of, people stream more, there's people doing this. It's like, yeah, but for this particular example, it's very crucial that we have basically we create a scenario where if we bring someone new in, then it's going to be so easy for someone to adjust and be a part of what we're doing already.
I think the point you make, especially to us, like privately, is that you tend to be the glue between, like, holding everything together, especially behind the scenes, we run everything, like most of the audio is ran through Discord, and you each going off into your game rooms. But in between games, you obviously collate in the sort of the green room of the showdown. But the biggest risk this time was the first one without you being in there, because you were in the lowdown for the entirety. So we had to make sure that there were people able, and kudos to Jack, who ended up being the ringleader for that. He's been in enough showdowns to know how it runs, to make sure it does run seamlessly, because we are consciously aware that it's a long old weekend, and so we need to make sure that games are running and ticking along. So Jack was pushing people along where they needed to be pushed along, and not having you in that role was quite a risk, and bringing new people into that environment without you being that conduit between, like, introducing them to the group basically and making them feel welcome and understanding when other people may not necessarily. I don't think other people do that role as well as you do, and I think that would have been the biggest risk if we were to, like, remove you from that environment and then put new people in as well as giving that sort of commanding role in that particular sort of environment to someone who isn't really familiar with doing it.
Yeah, I think there's not from everybody. I think people, we've talked about it enough, right? I think people think that, they just keep picking their mates. It's like, no, it's not. That is so not the reason. If it was just our mates, there would be numerous people that would be in favor of other people all the time. It's just not how it works. Like, essentially we're building a cast of characters, and those characters have to blend to make a good story. And each showdown weekend essentially is the best story that we can tell with the tools that we have, and then we're reacting to all the random elements that are Football Manager based. Usually, if we try and make it sure we can control as much as possible, so that whatever happens randomly with Football Manager, and sadly for us it is quite random at times, we can deal with any scenario that comes up. So again, having all those people in play, because the last thing you want to create a scenario, right, someone new comes in, something goes wrong, and they have no idea what's happening. They've got X amount of people watching. They're saying to those people, I don't know what happens now. I don't know what's going on. I never want that sort of situation to crop up or happen. And this just basically mitigates for that on this occasion. So yeah, it's quite easy for me to justify when we can talk about it in this fashion. But yeah, I can understand if you see a lineup and you want to comment on it straight away, it will look like, oh, it's the same guys again. But yeah, it was done very much with the thought of, let's make sure we replay this pretty safe this time around. But no, I think overall it went pretty well. And it's interesting. We talked about it a minute ago, right, about when we make decisions and how early we tell people they are in a showdown, because there's two sides to this, isn't there? One, give people enough time to make plans a month in advance. There's also the idea of that's a long time for problems to crop up. And so I tend to leave it pretty late to a point where like you literally couldn't organize anything in between because there's not enough time. So sometimes it's usually around that 2-week mark that people finally know, oh, I'm involved, I'm taking part. I'll probably ask them before that. But we had, without naming names, we had dropouts this time on numerous occasions. It forced us to make switches. People ended up in showdowns that were supposed to be on lowdowns and all that sort of stuff. But overall, I think, again, we're trying to create this cast of characters to make the best story. And I think the story we told was actually really good in the end.
I agree. I think it was a lovely little. Well, you say lovely. We'll talk about what happened in the end later on.
Well, how for you? It's obviously the dynamic. You touched on it a minute ago. The dynamic of me being on the lowdown is different for most people, I think, because they're just not used to it. They used to be so basically destroying the lives of Zealand, Kev, Lily, Jack, etc. Right. Whereas this time around, I'm still doing that, but I'm doing it from a different seat. So how different is it for you as a host, knowing that one of basically your partner in crime here is sat right next to you?
It's when we sort of formulate the lowdown panel, I like to have a bit of continuity. It doesn't have to be from season to season necessarily, although it does tend to be that way. But purely to help people along, I think, as well, and also in terms of helping me, because there are times, bear in mind, I'm doing multiple roles at once. So I'm not just hosting it. I'm producing the stuff in the background, and there's a reason why I need 62 buttons over 3 stream decks to be able to handle that. So to have someone as adept as you are at sort of the hosting role, and also there's the nuances that you pick up on very well, and Curti does as well, as does Dan, I think, in particular. I'm not that I'm discounting what the others offer, but I think that the experience in streaming, as well as doing other content and just generally being well versed in that, you pick up on those times where it looks like I need a bit of time to fix something or sort something out, or work my way around it, or if I'm having to message Millie to make sure he's doing something, or anything like that. Any of the other production elements, which would normally be done by a dedicated producer, you pick up on those elements very quickly. But also, we do these sorts of conversations quite frequently. It's useful. I think that helps more than anything. Much like I speak with Curti fairly frequently, I speak with Dan fairly frequently. So they pick up on, or you and them pick up on those little cues better than most do, because you just sort of experience that conversational element with us.
Yeah, we know when to throw you a ring.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It's but because it's funny, isn't it? Because we'll come on to it a little bit more in detail when we talk about the draft. In fact, do you know what? We can kind of move there now. Actually, like the way obviously we set things up, we have a draft on the Wednesday, we have the league format on the Saturday, and then the knockouts where Kev always wins on the Sunday. Hate it. Gotta just say hate it. But it's interesting. This time, obviously, we did something different. We've talked about how the draft operates and how it works from a lowdown perspective. We won't go into too much detail because, trade secrets and all that. But the way in which we go through drafts now is slightly different. It used to be quite led by the picks, and now it's sort of led by the conversations, and a pick will then start a longer conversation rather than every pick being a focus. Right. The first few rounds, of course, we'll focus on those, but then it becomes more of a roundtable discussion. But the twist, obviously, it will look to the outside like the twist happened because I was on the lowdown. It was actually that me being on the lowdown allowed the twist. It was slightly different. It was the other way around to what people think, because we basically concluded, and it goes back to what we were just saying about the lowdown panel, is that I'll get the best experience of what the lowdown is like by being on it. And I identified that pretty quickly to you. In fact, I said to you probably it was as early as, I would say, early January, late December, where I said I need to be on the lowdown panel. No matter what we do, no matter what the lineup is, I need to be on the Lowdown panel. So for the rest of the year, when I come to talk about it and make decisions on it with you on Sundays or in moments like this, we've got a better understanding of what's required. So that was a given. 2 weeks later, you threw me under the bus because Matthew said, shall we swap the teams? I'm thinking, yeah. I mean, we've talked about it for a long time. It's been a conversation, right? We've had for ages.
I think this has been going, like the suggestion of it has been going since probably the latter stages of FM20. Is it like a possible option of what we could do? And then each time we go to do it, someone suggests it, and it's like, we can't do it now because it looks like we're using their idea. But this, we thought about it before people even suggested it. And then obviously the opportunity to run something like this, if you were in the showdown, it would look very contrived because you would, ultimately you are one of the key decision makers, and you are the de facto arbiter of any indecision. So it would look like you've made that decision, and because you know it, like there was a lot of talk after the twist about competitive integrity, which, never mind about that. But
so we'll talk about that in a minute.
But it would have been, I mean, imagine if we'd have done that and you were in the showdown and knew about it from the start. Like that, that would have been horrendous. Whereas at least this way, you can make that decision without. I will, I'll take 70% of the blame because I did suggest. I said if we're going to do it, this is the perfect time. But you also agreed to it, so the 30% is fair.
I agreed to it knowing what I was taking on, though. It was like, because you get to play host and I get to play ringleader. And I thought, okay, I know where this is going to fall when it starts to boil down, which was really interesting for me. Deciding to do it, obviously, was the biggest twist we've done, without doubt, right? And there's a few reasons why we decided to do it. One, I think it's fucking excellent. I think we can swear on this. No one's watching. because I think it adds a new element to things, right? You have the opportunity then to test a manager with a team of players he's not prepared for, and it basically it's a twist for that reason. The reverse of that, of course, is you're taking away their hard work. Well, sometimes they get knocked out early, and they might have planned for a semi-final, so sometimes they lose their own little bits of hard work. This time around, you said a moment ago, it was the perfect time to do it because none of them thought we would have the balls to do it, frankly, Matthew. None of them were expecting it at this point. Not many people were talking about it at this point. To do it in the first one, to have such a big gimmick, if you like, it's such a big twist. We had to catch them out. And the graphic that's gone round of the 9 of them reacting is on 3 of my monitors as my background. That's how proud of it I am right now. Seeing Dave sort of just inquisitively, what? Why are they doing this? What was nice is there was 3 or 4 of them that have suggested it in our Sunday night late night calls, these infamous calls that we have post showdown, that have gone, what about if we swap the teams? And every single time Matt jumps in and goes, right, we're not doing it. You shouldn't have brought it up. It's already in the pot of ideas. Why have we said it? And then for 3 months, it disappears. So again, no one thought it would be this time around. I would have reacted the same as them. I'm sure you would have. I'm sure most people would have had they had their team taken away. But I thought, the extra element it brought in to cause them some problems was pretty perfect.
No, I completely agree. I think the outcome of all of it, aside from the ridiculous flack that you ended up getting for it, and whatever else happened, just because people on the internet seem to fail at being rational occasionally and realizing this is a video game competition and not the matter of life and death that some people seem to think it is. But the reaction of that, obviously, it created the Meme Showdown as well, which was one of my favourite parts of the entire weekend.
Yeah, and the irony is, right, that video now will go out on this channel, so you'll be able to find it would be the sort of the Sunday preview, Saturday rundown video compilation that Joe put together, so you can definitely find it if you want to watch everyone's reaction live. And I'd say there's a range of emotion. There's anger in 9 different ways. And, there's some sort of like mad laughter, and there are like Jack and Z storm off. It's excellent. It's so good. And also, there's a little bit in all of them, I think, that are thinking that what a lot of the viewers thought of. So that's why he's not in the showdown, and that was just making me find. I find that even funnier. I'm thinking that's not why, but I love the fact you think it has to be because of that. It was great, and also it gives us the opportunity to go back to twists or similar twists that we've done before now. Like there was a risk that we become a bit formulaic. Like you heard some of the guys say when they're forced to watch the lowdown, they're like, oh yeah, they're going to give us a player. Like not many of them predicted straight away what was about to happen, but the realization of them then thinking, oh God, it's what happened was was really, really good. It went to plan. People's react, like we talked about it a lot, right? We knew what people would be like.
Yeah, I think also like the other reasons maybe why we haven't done it, not just because people had sort of mentioned it in the past, was also because we needed to have people to be able to help out in the background to make it happen. Like that we needed to work out a way how people can log those teams and then be able to switch them around quickly. Because one thing we are quite acutely aware in terms of like the production is try to actually limit the amount of Football Manager you really see. Because some of it isn't, in terms of presentation, it looks a bit amateur, I think. And so this is the first time where we've actually been able to have like a crew of people collate. I think we had 5 people entering draft teams so that we can then grab that information and make the graphics quickly, with like effectively seamlessly whilst we're live, which we couldn't do without those people helping out. So that is the other sort of side of it as well. Like I said about the processes and trying to streamline things and everything like that in the background to make it as easy for those people coming in as possible to help out if they are willing to offer their assistance, for us to be able to put those things together. But yeah, the twist, I don't think it could have gone any better than it did, really.
No. Thing is, I knew what the people that we were doing it to would be like. I perhaps underestimated the pain chats would go through separately, and then the pain that would then come to. I don't mind being criticised for the decision. If you disagree with like the fact we did it, if you are worried about the competitive integrity, ultimately we draw the line of where the competitive integrity is. So I don't. That's why I didn't have any problems doing it. It's like, well, yeah, but as much as you might be frustrated by it, I get to conclude that we're a 3 on the scale of fun competition with your friends, and that number 10 being esports, professional level esports. We sit like below the middle point because of how much RNG there is, right? How many random elements exist within Football Manager? We can't control those in the same way that traditional esports can, but can we still make it a fun competition with competitive elements? Absolutely we can. And to me, this was just, we just moved the goalpost a little bit. We didn't change the game. We just moved the goalpost, and that to me makes it as fun as it was. To anyone that went a little bit too far, look, I'll forgive you this time, but yeah, it wasn't. I didn't enjoy my Thursday and Friday very much, I'll be honest, and it made me dread the weekend a little bit if it was going to continue. But I also knew, because of how much we talked about it, people would ironically cool down, Matthew, and there would be this acceptance of, do you know what? Actually, it's not as bad as I first thought, and it made for some brilliant talking points over the weekend, which brings us sort of onto the league. But yeah, I thought your idea was great. That's what I would
say. I mean, you lasted until I think quite late on the Wednesday, maybe early Thursday, to actually finally out me as the genius. I say genius, the evil behind the idea. But yeah,
I think people just thought I was rigging it, that I would never have to take part in that kind of twist. But it was kind of like, well, how can I? Because but we've talked about this as well. This year, there will be opportunity for you to take creative direction with twists. So I have no idea. All the twists we've done in the past, I've known about, but they're ones that it wouldn't impact how I draft. It's just an extra or an additional thing or something being taken away at random that I couldn't predict nor factor for in any of the drafts that we did. And one occasion, right, we let the viewers decide the pool, that sort of thing. So there's lots of ways we can incorporate different people into the decision-making process and equally take me out of it, which I think is often more important, especially when I'm in the showdowns. So yeah, there'll be more twists like that, just maybe not quite as brutal as that for the rest of the year. But who knows, Matt? Maybe we'll do it next time. The mystery goes on. We could do it at any point now. You could do it at any point now. God, if I'm in the next one and suddenly all of a sudden Matt goes tunes the lowdown, we're swapping the teams, I'll be around the room. People will see how I react to it. Goodness me, that'd be chaotic. But let's talk about the league then. How did Jack do that? I mean, what on earth?
Maybe he was assisted by the fact that his. I mean, maybe not. Actually, I was thinking about it. So to the league he was, and then knockouts less so with the squad he was handed.
he did not want Curtie's team. None of them wanted any of the teams. That was the greatest bit about the twist. They got back in the call, and everyone was going, "Oh, you're so lucky you've got my team." And then the reaction was, "That's a dreadful team." Yeah. Every single time, without fail.
I think one thing that we did learn throughout, through their initial reaction. I appreciate we're going back to the twist a little bit, but the main thing that I think we must have realised, and I think we did point it out on a couple of occasions throughout the weekend, was that each competitor very much drafted for a tactic that they had, how they wanted to play, rather than be like drafting a team of potential options and making sure that they have flexibility in terms of positions across a squad to be able to be adaptive if they need to I can't even talk today. I've done 15 hours.
People should realise this is completely fair. It's been a long 2 weeks.
Particular positions in terms of like just giving them more tactical flexibility. Whereas I think we've realised that people were drafting very much for a particular tactic and were really annoyed when they couldn't do that, which again was one of the reasons why we did it, because it shows who is the best manager in terms of like tactics and being able to adapt on the fly, not just to a given team, but also are they going to try and shoehorn that team into the tactic they were trying to work, which I think Curtie admitted he was trying to do for the team he was inheriting.
It worked. It was lucky, right?
But then when we interviewed him at the end of the lowdown, he said he would have much rather have had his own team back.
Yeah. I finished 7th. I mean, up to him, really, wasn't it? Up to him. But it was a fascinating display of different like tactical battles. People playing against their own teams that they drafted, beating them, losing to them, how they would react to those situations. Zealand getting his own team back. We didn't really talk about that in the team twist. I'm not sure anyone was more upset than Z. Quietly upset. Went and got a beer. Came back. His chat were furious. Sits down. Gets his team back, little wink to the camera, and continued on about his day. It was very funny, but it set up the story, didn't it? We basically we left the option in that they could get their team back, because if a couple of people did, that storyline in itself is great. Like I said to you afterwards, I wish we had maybe 2 or 3 people get their teams back, because then you have different battles going on. A few teams have swapped around, but then you have these 3 people with their own teams really going for it at the same time. That would have been great, but we can't plan everything.
Thankfully, I think of all the people that got their team back, I'm quite glad it was Z, mainly for like I don't know how he would have been able to cope with it, and also his chat would have been up in arms more so than they already were about the entire thing. And my word, that would have been something to try and get a handle on. And if he'd have got relegated, I've done it now, eliminated, like ended up in the elimination playoff, I'm sure they would have been rioting. But I mean, imagine if he'd have swapped teams and he'd won. That's the thing. How would they have reacted?
Would he have taken Jack's team? He probably would have now, right? He'd probably take Jack's team. Kev took it, won with it. Of course he did. I thought it was Kev's worst draft. He still did the classic thing he does in the league, which is rotate enough that everyone's fit in every game without having to use the sponge, and then just cruises through the knockout stage. That was one of the easier rides I think he's had. The knockout stages. We asked him afterwards, right? He said McKinn's was one of his tougher games, but actually made it look pretty easy, which makes it all the more infuriating. We went to bed on Saturday, Matt. We were pretty happy with proceedings. Everything had gone quite well. I know McKinn's and second out the card weren't that happy, but everyone else was pretty content. They were through. And then we wake up to the news of Mason Greenwood, which suddenly made things a lot more serious. And we waited a long time to make a statement on it. We were talking about it for at least 5-6 hours beforehand about the right way to deal with it. We knew instantly, well, he's not going to compete in Sunday. Is like the scenario we had obviously was, what if he scores a goal? What if he scores the winning goal in a final? And the storyline, the headline of a showdown is like Mason Greenwood scores the winner in Showdown final. Like that was a position we didn't want to put anybody in. What he's alleged to have done is extremely serious. The evidence that was provided on social media was very damning. And of course, the police are obviously dealing with that as an investigation now. For us as a showdown, we thought it was important not only to make a point of where people can go if they think they see people in this kind of situation, or again, if you can help comfort those who need to take action and do go about that in the right way, that can only be a positive to everyone in the showdown. That was sort of a considered view from all of us. From a logistic view, we knew we had to take that player away from Zealand and find a way to replace him. One of the reasons our statement was so late was we had to wait for Z to wake up. that was the biggest problem we had, that we couldn't talk about. People were saying, what are you going to do about Greenwood? I'm like, yeah, we'll make a statement shortly. But equally, I'm thinking, where is he? Yeah. What time will he wake up? So we can now reveal, I guess, what we offered him. Because it was a conversation, again, that had to be a conversation not just amongst us and Zealand, that had to be a conversation amongst all the competitors. Again, as much as we're saying there doesn't need to be competitive integrity, we do try and keep it where it makes the most sense to have it. So we offered Z a couple of options. The first of which was you could have a straight swap for a player of a very, very similar quality, or you could have recently transferred. Like it worked out quite nicely for us in that sense. Again, it wasn't a gimmick, but it was just the timing was quite good for us in that Luis Diaz had signed for Liverpool that day, and he was one of the options. But the other three players you could have had were Dries Mertens, Hulk, and Ansu Fati, who, in terms of the ability of those players, it's very, very similar to Greenwood. They all play similar roles. But then what we had to take into account, and we did take into account, was the form that Z had Greenwood in. And it was a case of, well, actually what we'll do is we'll give him the option of those three players as their sort of straight swaps, but we'll also say you can have Luis Diaz, who is slightly better in terms of ability, but hopefully will counteract the idea that you're losing a player in form. So as much as we didn't really care to what happened to Greenwood, we did care about Z having a team that was fit to compete for the rest of the tournament at the same time.
Yeah, I think we should emphasise that the solution to the issue that we had introduced to the Showdown was very much the secondary sort of thing. We knew that was it. We had to take it. We used the Showdown hive mind, I think I've referred them to, which is everyone. We basically consulted them on what we thought was going to be the most appropriate action in terms of not. Bear in mind, this isn't just like a competition. We are a company, so we have to have like a corporate responsibility to make sure that it's difficult. Like we both kind of, like, for the company side of all of this, we're both quite new to it. And I said this to everyone like last night. So we are kind of learning on the job. So when it comes to these sorts of really very serious situations that seem to be cropping up a lot more than they ever have done, which frankly is abhorrent in its own right, but we wanted to make sure that we were strong enough in our position so that it's such a hard thing to weigh up, and there are some absolute morons in the world, like on Twitter, that just I don't know what goes into their heads and how they whether it's just tweeting for the sake of getting reactions or rises out of people or what, but I think that was the most disheartening part of all of this, was having to look through those responses and handle those sorts of things.
Yeah. It's worth saying there was very few of those. There was probably I think the amount of people that have seen that tweet, I think maybe 5 people decided to be idiots about it and not to understand the wider scope of what was going on. Maybe they don't watch the Showdown. I don't know. Maybe they thought it was knee jerk. I don't know what. Frankly, I don't care what their justification would have been for their conclusion of, oh, you shouldn't have done this. We knew it was the right thing to do. We stand by what we did. We'd do it again. We knew that making a statement on Twitter and discussing it at the beginning of the show was the right thing to do. After that, I think because of the way we handled it, I didn't see anyone talk about it. It didn't come up again. I think we're good at getting those big decisions right, and as new as we are at that, I think the fact that we are prepared to have that conversation with everybody, the hive mind, as you suggested, right, can discuss it and talk about the way in which we outwardly face. Those are discussions that happen not just when a key decision like this has to be made, but are ongoing amongst us. And I'm very keen, as someone that leads the meetings on the Sunday night, to say, look, the things have been brought up, whether they are community-based, right, whether it becomes a conversation about women in the football manager community or diversity in the football manager community. They're things we address head on, right? And they're not things that we shirk and we shy away from. I myself am very open to those discussions. I know that you are. And many of the people involved in the Showdown who don't have to be representatives to the Showdown sometimes take it upon themselves to say, like, this is how we feel about it. Relax. Like there's a point of discussion that goes on. Just trust us. And we're hoping that people will continue to give us that trust. And so far, I think we do a pretty good job at that. And especially when it comes to these big serious situations. And I think between us, we handled it perfectly.
No, I wouldn't change how we handled it. And I think I was effectively responsible for writing the statement that we would read out on the lowdown. But even then, my main concern after I'd written it, and I'd spent probably about an hour, maybe an hour and a half, like writing it, rewriting it, rewording it to make sure that it gave the correct strength of message that we thought would be enough. And then I wanted it vetted by everyone else because if you are involved, you're almost represented by proxy there, by that statement. So it's only fair that everyone else kind of agrees to sort of the words that we're saying, even if they don't agree. And I'm quite sure that everyone involved did, but to make sure that not just that they agree with it, but also if I need to change how we are saying certain things, because when I'm delivering that live, I can obviously change my tone, make it very obvious that this is an incredibly serious thing. We talked about that as well. We talked about tone of delivery and the way in which you said it. That was absolutely so important to how we brought it out. And I all of my concern was how like in terms of positioning in the show, in terms of like we've just had a whole raft of highlights of joking about like the draft and what's happened. The league stage. Then we've got the Proudies intro, which builds up to something. I can't then go straight into a serious statement after that. It's so jarring for an audience. And also, we don't want to open with something like that, like straight away. And I think introducing everyone, although I was struggling with how do we formulate this, the start of what was going to happen. Match of the day, I guess they can get away with certain things, so they don't have a whole raft of highlights beforehand, so you can have Gary Lineker standing at the start reading a statement about how they've reacted to something, whereas I think introducing everyone, then shifting tone, doing the serious thing, and also making sure that everyone is watching. I think that's the other thing. That
was key for us as well.
Make sure that we're not having to having to repeat ourselves, but make sure that we've got everyone in. We're not just throwing this at the start so it could be missed. We're making sure that everyone is focused on us at that point to make sure that they have heard the message that we are delivering and our stance on the entire situation. Yeah.
And again, frankly, I'm proud of how we dealt with it. And I think we'd deal with it the exact same way if something like that happens again, which I really do hope it doesn't happen again.
Agreed.
Going back to, we're going to have to, again, change of tone now. Going back to the showdown and the knockout weekend, is it getting boring? The fact he's won several of them.
I mean, you asked him the question, and he said no, he loves it.
which I was hoping he would go a little bit, but it's like Michael Schumacher in F1 that during that period with Ferrari, where it would be a foregone conclusion that he would win. There needs to be a bit more of a giant killing when it comes to Lollujo. We need someone to come and take it off him. Still, only 4 people have beaten him or knocked him out of Showdowns. I'm one of them.
Yeah. So I think it is worth mentioning that obviously different managers, different squads, but second yellow card, who was given Kev's team, finished bottom, got knocked out of the elimination playoff. We could have got rid of him potentially that early. For the first time ever, Kev would have been in an elimination playoff and then knocked out before he even starts. And
that is 70% your fault, we now know as well. So, I'll take my 30% responsibility, but it's 70% your fault. Yeah, I don't know how he would have done. What he found on Saturday, the meta for set pieces was incredible. Jack was putting in, I dare say, 30% more crosses than anybody else, was having an outrageous amount of success from those. And Matt, on the reverse of that, we didn't really talk about it too much publicly, but Matt had the shortest team, the worst aerial team, again, a team that was created and made up by Kev. I think Kev would have struggled a lot with that team. I said it on the draft show that we did. I didn't think it was his strongest draft. I felt like he wasn't playing into the meta of Football Manager too well, and then eventually settled on something else and had Reece James with 9 assists that's 9 assists in 8 games. That sort of tells you its own story, really. It was lucky that Jack drafted a team that we did know was the best Jack draft of all time. And then, because I genuinely felt like it was Jack's best draft, but I did also know we were about to take it away from him. So there was that humorous element to all of it. It is interesting with Kev. He can't quite believe that he's won this many. We definitely can't believe that he's won this many. I'm certainly not. People think I'm furious about it. Again, this is sort of the behind the scenes show, so I can be honest. there's a large element of me that thinks this is brilliant. But would I like more difference in winners? Would I like a range of winners rather than Kev and 1-1-1, Clates 1-1-1? Not really. It would be nice to have a few more people take the crown every now and again. But you have to give him his props. Like, he's pretty good at this PvP draft nonsense.
And he makes the fewest changes out of anyone, really.
Yeah.
He why would you change from a formula that seems to work every time? Like it. Well, I'd say every time. It's like
more often than not. When he's in a showdown,
what's the name of the
odds on to win it?
Anchorman, Sex Panther. That's it. It's 60%
Okay.
of the time, all the time.
Yeah.
I'm not calling Kevin Chapman a Sex Panther. Just for
thank goodness for that. When he's in a panther costume, again, 70% your fault when that turns up. Yeah. Next time that happens, that's going to be my new thing. That is 70% responsible for all of this. But no, again, he wins it again. It almost makes sense, right? First showdown of the year. Of course he wins it. Like, why wouldn't he win it? This is what this man does. I think he has won. Didn't he win the first ever showdown, the first one of 21 and the first of 22? Like, again, as we say, we like to tell the best story. And if this happens to be the story, like, he beat McKinns, obviously, who knocks him out of the previous one on his way there. He then takes on a man that has derided him on the lowdown for 2 years and beats him in the final. And Curtie had a big chance to do something special too. But yeah, well, again, we'll give him his props. It is pretty impressive. What we're going to do with him now? Stick him in the lowdown, keep him in the showdown? I guess we'll find out. He says he wants back in. So, great.
He just wants the money. That's what it is. He's
probably, yeah.
He wants to add to his pile of money that he's already got.
That's true. Yeah, the pot that he sits on and sips champagne from every single night of his life. I think the story of him winning again, when he gets knocked out, there's a reason that's a big deal, because it doesn't happen very often. It's only happened 4 times in 15 showdowns now. Well, I think he's been in 12 or something now, so maybe something like that. I think he's missed 3. So yeah, so most of the time, what was it, 66% of the time he wins the showdowns he's in? God damn it, we've got to do something. Yeah,
literally when he Sex Panther.
Yeah, when he gets past 70%, we can put you in, because then it could be 70% your fault that he loses, or something like that. I don't think the maths checks out. But all in all, that was good fun. I think we've had a stressful couple of weeks. Again, you've travelled the length of the country to make it happen. Obviously, you're going to have to keep doing the travelling now. You're going to have to get more pictures of other people that we have in. That has to be a new consideration for us.
For showdowns, just for clarification, because I don't want people to think that I'm just going around stalking randomers, because
when Matt
going around the country taking photos of people makes it sound quite suspicious.
Yeah. When Matt starts suggesting we get more people from Australia, I'm going to think, hang on a minute, I know what's going on here. The budget's only going to go so far. I don't know what you're
talking about. I haven't booked any tickets for New York or anything yet.
Yeah. Well, you said to me, well, you would, if it wasn't during COVID times, you'd have gone. I went, you'd have gone. We'd both be going. I mean, that's an expense worth taking, isn't it? Love a holiday.
Also, HMRC didn't say that, so
yeah. Shout out to yes, true. Shout out to Z, who had to put together his own shots from New York, and actually did a pretty good job. To be fair, you couldn't necessarily tell.
No, and his running commentary did entertain me when I was going through them.
When he retires, we'll release that whole thing as extended.
It was very entertaining for me. So I don't know if Proudy enjoyed it as well, but I thought it was his general just giving out about, I'm not very, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to iron the green screen. They're the little snippets you can have. They were. Yeah, it kept me laughing at about 4 o'clock in the morning when I was going through it.
Yeah, there was the intro days are late nights for those that don't know. As much as I stay out for the hockey, that is a different animal. We asked Twitter for some questions, Matt. We've got a whole host of them for me to try and sieve through, or attempt to sieve through, to ask us from people over on Twitter. Of course, if you're not following us on Twitter, please do, at the FM Showdown on Twitter. Not verified yet. We could probably do something about that. We need some more articles written about us. I think that's the way you get verified these days, Matt. I'm not sure. Shall I throw some of the questions your way? Some that could be applicable to you?
Go on then.
That's probably the best way to go about this. Let's find one of the best ones. Just funny. One of the questions we got was, what is it like behind the scenes for you guys? So hopefully the Cooldown is now going to give you a bit more of an insight, Martin. Thank you for the question. Let's find, again, there's so many questions. I'm trying to find the best one. Any plans for player trades or auction drafts to become a part of the showdown at some point? That comes from Pumpster, who helped us behind the scenes this time around, actually.
Auction drafts, I think, as we've discussed, is if it was available in Football Manager as a method of drafting, yes, I think would be the answer. As it's not, the workload involved in trying to basically build that outside of Football Manager is just mind-boggling. And the way we would be able to, it's not just like on the lowdown, we could potentially present that okay, but it's then organising that without Football Manager across all of the other streams. There have been discussions about how we can make our own draft tool in the past. We've brought it up. It's been one of those things that but it's just at this point, it's not worth the time investment or the financial investment to be able to put something like that in that we may only use for one showdown, because ultimately we don't know how it would work in terms of a presentation, and because of that, it would be a lot of risk, both, like I said, in terms of time and financial investment, to find out it didn't work and then write it off as an experience.
Yeah, that's funny actually. I'm going through a lot of the questions. We've answered loads of these throughout the show. People have asked things like about the twist, or we covered that in quite a lot of detail. How long was the showdown in the works for? Ethan, thank you for the question. I feel like we answered that one as well. James just put, why do you all have to be so collectively wonderful and together produce such an entertaining show? Which is, I mean, Matt, do you want to cover that?
We're just, just that.
Just that great
something
sometimes,
like that.
Any new formats or rules coming into the future? The format and the rules question is interesting, right? Because we get a lot of questions about when will there be more people in a showdown? When's that happening? Things like this. Never is probably going to be the answer to that question. We started off with 8 when the showdown first came around, when myself, Foxy, Z had some conversations about it as well, and decided 8 was the right number. When we brought you in, we decided to explore the options of having an extra person to give us the elimination game. And then since we settled on 9, we're really happy with 9. We think that with the current way that Football Manager allows it and the way in which we structure things is, I don't know if there's such a thing as a perfect number, but it is the perfect number for us.
In terms of a format, I think it's become our format. So obviously, adding more numbers to that kind of makes it more difficult. And also that there are time constraints that we have to consider. That's one of
the biggest things, isn't it, the time?
Yeah, because on the Saturday, we've got 9 game weeks to get through. Each participant has to get through 8 games themselves. So that's you add more time onto that. We're always conscious about people's viewing time. You watch football on a Saturday, that's probably, like, if you've got game after game, that's a 4 or 5 hour chunk of time. I remember some of the earlier ones where we weren't finishing till 12 because we were still getting used to the format. Yeah. And it's like that. You have to be conscious about the people that are sat there, not just streaming, but also low down time. Like, I have most people there by 5:45. And then if we're not finishing until 11, potentially, that's a long old time you're sat down. Yes, we have like 2 5-minute breaks. Sorry, throughout. Like, so that is, but that's still a long old chunk of time to be, for the best part of 5 hours, if not longer, sat down. Yeah. Going through it. I'm quite sure we'd probably have some companies coming after us or health organisations coming after us saying it's not healthy to do that. But
it's half an hour a match is essentially is the way you would look at it. There are 9 match days. We start at, let's say, 7 o'clock. We finish around 11. I think we've decided now that is sort of the time. There's 9 match weeks. We get into 4 hours. So we're actually doing it slightly quicker than half an hour a game, which again it's not always a perfect science, but we kind of have to allow ourselves that. One of the other conversations, like, it's not a question that's been asked, but it's a conversation or a question I've seen a lot, is why don't you do a second league? Why don't you have like a tiered system? Why don't you have this? My question a lot of the time is, why would we? It doesn't really make sense. I don't think having a second platform for people would elevate them or what we have with the current showdown. I think, having spoken about it at length in this podcast, it's clear that if we doubled our workload, then, like, this is for neither of us. Is this our job? Like, I think people might listen to this and think that this is what we do full time. You're a professional voiceover artist and have been for a number of years. I'm very much the same with my own content creation, whether it be streaming or YouTube, etc. Like, this is very much an added bonus to all of the other things that we do, because we have a passion for this and we love doing that. And I would like to think that's probably come across in this podcast. If you think that we don't care after this, then I'm not sure what else we could have said. But yeah, I understand wanting to give more people opportunities and things like that, but we're not in a position to do that. Maybe in 5 years' time, when we are like official, we can do a European and a US. Like I say, official. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like a huge brand. When we're bought out, basically, by somebody else that says, here's 100 people, what do you want to do? We'll have a US division, and we'll have a UK division, or we'll do it in counties. I don't know how we do it, but there's different ways in which we can expand the format. I love the idea of doing a Norfolk Showdown.
At least you can win a final.
Will it be a host? Yeah, imagine I don't though. Imagine Josh Peach takes it off me. That'd be terrifying. That'd be awful. So there's, of course, there's loads of things we would do. Like, we've had conversations of like talking about expanding it into other games. That was one of the big conversations we had at one stage. And again, who knows whether we branch out to other games. Things like Rocket League and FIFA probably work towards it. But I think what's clear about the Showdowns is that it's very personality driven. It's very like energy driven, and you need to make sure you have all of the perfect combinations to bring it all together to, again, as I said at the start of this, to create the perfect story. And again, I think the story we told this weekend had a good middle, a good beginning, and a good end, which is ironically not the order in which most books are read. But but I think you get what I mean.
No, I think for anyone suggesting these sort of feeder leagues, basically, I think you underestimate the amount of work it goes into just putting this weekend on. And hopefully this sort of conversation has highlighted at least some of the things that we go through to put one on. It's very much time constraint as well. Like, I'll like behind the curtain slightly, there is actually a reserve league in the Streamer Showdown database where
Matthew, no, it's already there. It's already there.
which is used to store all of the teams that aren't participating in, so I don't have to create them each time.
Yeah.
But that's literally all it's used for. Because some people may have noticed in some of the other showdowns that some of the friendlies, they end up playing some of the teams in the reserve league. So it is there, but there's too much work to be able to do it. And also the Showdown database is pretty much made for one season wonder. That it does now work. Like, I've made it so it can be simulated through, but it's not always great. It doesn't. It's not.
We could do a whole podcast on the database. Oh, it's really good. It's just crazy, really.
Yeah. In terms of, there was one thing you mentioned about like bans or like rule changes in terms of the actual database. I did bring this up as a point in terms of if there is anything that we need to adjust in terms of how the database sees teams, like in terms of like how yellow cards work, whether they get reset for the final, how long bans are for a red card, and whether the whole violent conduct thing should be like, if it's, if the tackle is bad enough, should it be extended or allowed to be extended? There are a lot of things that we try to mitigate for using the in-game editor as well, but there are usually when I'm inputting the players, I'm not really down for, bear in mind I'm still my Wednesday, like following the draft, is we finish, everyone goes off. I may have got dinner at that point. Sometimes this time, not much less so. But I will then literally export all of the teams out of the draft mode save, and then start inputting them into the database. If Football Manager are listening, it would be lovely if you could put my request in for the unique IDs for each player to be put in, because that makes my job a lot easier, especially when there's lots of people called Jorginho and Henrique. That's just an aside. But it takes a long time to, I'm probably there once the stream finishes at 9:30, 10, or whenever it is, I'm probably still there at 1 or 2 in the morning. I don't just turn off. That's just one part. Like, obviously nothing can really happen until the database is made, because then everything else is built off the top of that. So it's a vital part. And yes, we could potentially put that on someone else, but equally, I'm not quite that trusting yet, I don't think.
That's just reminded me that we've not talked about the draft order debacle in this podcast, but we could do that another time. I'm sure it'll come up all over again. That's going to bring us to the end, Matthew. Thank you for your questions over on Twitter. Again, if you've got anything else you want to ask us in the comments of this video, please do. If you've enjoyed listening in the background to whatever you're doing, or if you watched our faces the entire time, thank you for watching. Do leave a like on the video as well. And make sure you subscribe to the channel. All the highlights from all the showdowns, as well as loads of the little bits and pieces, are going to start going on. You're going to see this channel become a lot more active over the next few months. as well as the return of the website, Matthew, which is going to get a little bit of a reboot as well, hopefully. So yeah, lots to look forward to. A really good showdown. Thank you to you, Matthew, for putting in all the work that you did. And thank you to me for being the brains behind it all.
Thank you. I mean, you could have waited for me to say thank you to you.
I'm starting to give myself credit. I think it's the easiest way to do it.
Give yourself credit. I mean, you're
Well
trying to
done,
get rid of this ego complex that people on Twitter think you seemingly have. You're not doing a very good job of.
Sorry, everyone.
Removing that.
It's not a case of I think I'm better. I know I am. Right, take care, everybody. We'll see you soon. Thanks for watching. Now run that outtake you cocked up at the start. Yeah, show them the real you. Unbelievable. I wanted to call it the come down. Matt's told me we can't call it the come down. We have to call it the cool down. So this is the cool down.
We're gonna have to stop because I've just realised.
What?
I've called it the come down in the overlay.
We had the dream. Change it. Who knew we had an outtake? I told you. We talked about this yesterday. I said, I'm DoctorBenjy. I don't do outtakes.